All right. Well, welcome back to our Psychological Health Talk series. Today we're going to be talking about optimism. This is the part 3 of a 4-part series based on my book, The Prevention of Depression. By the way, this book is available through Stress Management Clinic, and you can purchase it for $15 at our clinic if you're interested. But today we're going to be talking about optimism. Yesterday, or last week, or 2 weeks ago, we ended up talking about mindfulness, and today we're talking about optimism. Next week we'll be talking about resilience, 3 of the key factors that help us to be able to get control of our emotions and prevent falling into that stuck place we call depression. So I'd like to start, though, today with an optimism joke. Now, understand it's a joke. So in this joke, there's a research psychologist, of course it'd be a psychologist, who wants to understand the difference between optimism and pessimism. So he finds these identical twins, identical in every way, except one of them is a dyed-in-the-wool pessimist, and the other one is a raging optimist. He enlists his mother, the mother of these 2 children, we'll call them Dexter and Lester, to come in on their birthday for a research study. And so they come in, they start by getting Dexter to recognize that today's his birthday, and they mention to him, behind this door there's a room, and in this room there are all kinds of presents for you for your birthday, and you get to keep whatever's in this room. So he goes into the room. The research psychologist and the boy's mother come around. They look through the one-way mirror. They see him, and he's in this room. And in the room there are the most recent games, electronic games. There's lots of Legos. There are bikes. There are sports equipment. And he's sitting in the middle of the room. He's not playing with any of them. His head is down and he's kind of sniffling a little bit. And so the psychologist reaches over to the intercom button and he says, "Dexter, all of these toys are for you. You get to keep them as part of your birthday present." And Dexter says, I know these are all mine, and they're wonderful and great, and they're all going to break. And they're all going to become obsolete. And then I'm going to be so sad because I don't have them anymore. I wish I would have never had them to begin with. So the psychologist makes some notes in his notebook, trying to understand what it's like to be a pessimist. And he brings in the other boy, Lester, and he says, "Now, this is, Dexter's in this room, but in this room are your birthday presents. It is your birthday today, so we're going to allow you to keep whatever's in this room." So Mom and the research psychologist go into the room there, look through the one-way mirror, and there's Lester in the room, and he's up to his knees in horse manure. And he's giggling and laughing and flipping the horse manure into the air. And the psychologist reaches over to the intercom button and he says, "You do understand what this is, don't you? You're up to your knees in horse manure." And he says, "Yes, I know. And with all this horse manure in here, I think there must be a pony in here somewhere." This is not the kind of optimism that we're going to be talking about today. This is a joke, obviously. But we are going to be talking about a kind of an optimism that does make a difference in your life. So we're going to be talking about research that was done by a psychologist by the name of Martin Seligman. Now, Martin Seligman became well known in psychological circles for an initial research he did, it was on what we call learned helplessness. And I want to describe the research that he did, the study that he did. You wouldn't be able to do it today because it would never get past the ethics boards. But back in the 1970s, this wasn't as much of an issue. So his work on learned helplessness worked with dogs. And what he did is he brought them into a room, and in the room there would be this long cage. There would be a door on one end of the cage, and then it was a long cage, and he would bring them in and bring them into the cage. In the floor of the cage, there were things that were built into the floor, and then there was a low wall, and on the other side of the wall there was another floor with things that were built in. So he brought them in, and the dog would come in, and the cage would be closed, and then a mild electric shock would be passed through the floor of the cage, enough to make the dog uncomfortable, not enough to harm it in any way. So the dog would get that mild shock, it would feel that in its paws, and it would jump over the wall to get to the other floor. And when it got to the other floor, in this research study, there would be a second switch that would be flipped, and now a mild shock would be sent through that floor too. So the dog would jump back to the first side and would get shocked, and back to the second side and get shocked. And after this happened a couple of times, what the dog did was it laid down. It had recognized that there was no way to escape the difficult things that were going on in this cage. And shortly after that, when they would bring the dog in and put it in the cage, it would just lay down. It wouldn't even bother jumping across the low wall to get to the other side, because it had learned that no matter what had happened, where it was still going to get shocked, and it was still going to be uncomfortable. So he used this as a way to understand how people feel when in their life they become depressed. Something happens in their life and it hurts them in some way. They go to some other aspect of their life, but it doesn't help. They still feel hurt, they still feel sad, they still feel harmed in some way, they still feel the loss that is triggering their depression. And after a period of time, they give up. They stop trying. They just assume that no matter what they do, where they are, they're going to feel this way, and the depression becomes more pervasive and takes over their life. Now, in this original study, then Dr. Seligman found out that when they reversed the experiment, so you came into the cage and the mild electric shock happened on the first side of the wall, but not on the second side, and they could jump over the wall and escape it, the dogs had learned not to even try. And they had to actually physically drag them over the wall to the other side repeatedly before they would learn that they could get into the cage and jump over the low wall and escape the electric shock. It took time and energy and effort to try to make it clear to them that the original condition that caused them to feel like they were helpless had changed, and they now did have the ability to make a change. So this was his original work. It got him to be well known in the psychological community. It certainly captures the experience of many people who describe themselves as feeling depressed, and it became a way for us as clinicians to understand what was going on with some of the people that we work with. He also then developed a second way of looking at things. And he said, if we can learn how to be helpless, if we can learn to be depressed, is it possible that we can learn optimism? We can learn a way to manage our lives differently that will help us to avoid and reverse our depressive feelings. And we're going to talk about learned optimism today. First of all, though, I want to talk a little bit about what optimism is not. So it's become quite popular in some of the self-help books these days to talk about always thinking positively, always change your negative thoughts into positive thoughts. And that captures a small dimension of what we're going to talk about with optimism, but it is not what we're talking about today, and I can demonstrate it for you right now. So if the problem with saying always think positively, always replace your negative thoughts with positive thoughts, is that it draws attention to the negative thoughts. So if I instruct you right now to not think of your left foot, what happens? You have to think of your left foot to know which foot not to think about. That becomes the basic problem we have with trying to replace our negative thoughts with all positive thoughts. What happens is that our brains want to make sure that if I'm instructing it not to think negative thoughts, to keep checking back. Am I thinking negatively now? How about now? Now am I thinking negatively? And so the instruction to only think positive thoughts actually increases our probability that we will think negative thoughts. And then, complicating that even further, if I've been doing some of this reading and I think my positive thoughts create my better life for me, and my life isn't better, then it must be my fault, because I'm not getting rid of all my negative thoughts, which in itself is a negative thought, of course, and that reinforces my belief that it's me, it's my fault, that's why I'm having these bad outcomes. That kind of optimism is not helpful. Now, we've all met people who try to pretend that they're going to be optimists, and they see everything as wonderful and rosy, and no matter what it is, and that's not terribly helpful in keeping us out of depression for the exact reason that we're talking about. It draws us into self-blame, it draws us into paying more attention to all the negative thoughts that I'm trying to rid myself of, rather than being able to have a strategy that will make a difference. So let's talk about an interesting study that occurred that helps us to understand something of the difference. So in this study, they took a group of people and they did some pre-testing to them to identify a group of people who were optimistic and a group of people who were pessimistic. And then what they did is they had them predict things in their lives, how things might occur in their lives. What they discovered in this study was, first of all, those people who were pessimistic, when we looked at their predictions for their lives and compared those to the actuarial tables that insurance companies use. Actuaries are individuals who take statistics and look at what are the probabilities. So what are the probabilities that you're going to have an income of this amount? What are the probabilities that you're going to have this kind of medical condition? What are the probabilities for all kinds of different things? What they found out was that the pessimists are more realistic when we compare them to the actuarial tables that insurance companies use. And most pessimists will be happy to tell you this. I'm not really a pessimist, I'm just being realistic. Turns out that when we look at predictions based on statistics, pessimists are more realistic than optimists, who are regularly predicting that their lives will be better than statistically we would expect. But here's the interesting thing. Those people who were optimists in this study regularly beat the odds. So their lives actually were better than what would be predicted by statistical predictions from actuarial tables. They weren't being unrealistic about their lives. Their lives were better than the lives of the pessimists. And the question is, how does this happen? Well, what we then need to look at are what we see are actuarial tables. What we see are the way that individuals actually live their lives. And we're looking at how they attribute their actions in their lives. And it turns out that both pessimists and optimists make attributions on three different dimensions. The personal dimension, what's happening in my life has something to do with me and how I perceive and how I act in my life. The second dimension is persistence. What are the repetitive things that occur in life over time? And pervasive. What happens not just in this situation, but in multiple different situations in my life? And it turns out that optimists and pessimists approach these attributions differently. So I'd like to get into it a little bit more in depth, because this is an interesting opportunity, and we're going to start by taking a simple example. So we're going to start by saying an optimist and a pessimist both see a very beautiful sunset. Now at this point, if we ask them, was that a beautiful sunset? Both the optimist and the pessimist will agree that yes, that was a beautiful sunset. Now if we ask them, well, how did you see this beautiful sunset? The pessimist is likely to say, well, I got lucky. I happened to be here at this time, and there was a sunset, and I happened to see it, and boy, that was really, really good luck for me that I got to see a beautiful sunset. The optimist takes a very different approach to it. The optimist is much more likely to say, I saw a beautiful sunset because I looked. I could have been doing something else, and there could have been a beautiful sunset going on, but I paused and I looked. And when I looked, I was able to see a beautiful sunset. Now, what we're seeing here is the aspect of personalization. The things that are good in life, and the truth is that every day in your life, good things and bad things happen. On the worst day of your life, something good happens that day too. On the best day of your life, something bad happens. Good and bad things are happening all the time. We attribute our life to how we approach these very different things. So the optimist is likely to say, when a good thing happens, I have something to do with it. I saw a sunset that was beautiful because I looked. The pessimist, by contrast, is likely to attribute good things to good fortune, not because of something that they did, but they just got lucky. I just happened to be in the right place at the right time to see this beautiful sunset. By contrast, the pessimist is much more likely to attribute bad things happening to themselves. So one of the things that we'll often hear people say, and particularly people who are in a difficult mood, they'll say things like, I'm just stupid. I'm just not good at this. I can't do these things. That's a pessimist attribution. I'm personalizing what's going on, and I am then making it me that's causing that bad thing to happen. So the individual who's pessimistic that gets a bad grade says, it's because I'm not very smart. The optimist that gets a bad grade is much more likely to say, it's because I didn't work hard enough, and if I worked harder, I'd get a better grade. Because I attribute good things to the things that I do, and I have some control over what I do. Now, that brings us to the second point. Let's see, let's just get this up here. Okay, so that's the personal. The second thing is that it's persistent. So here's what happens. If I see a beautiful sunset, and I think it's because I looked, there's a good probability that I will look again. Because I now know about when sunsets happen, and it doesn't mean that every time I look I'm going to see a beautiful sunset, but if I look more often, I will see more beautiful sunsets. It's a simple thing that makes a difference. When I can identify for myself something that I did that improved the quality of my life, and I do it again, it makes it more probable that I will have more favorable outcomes. You see, this isn't the same thing as assuming that because I think positive thoughts, something magical happens and positive things happen. This is actually a systematic strategy. When I am looking more often for more beautiful sunsets, on the days there are beautiful sunsets, I'm more likely to see them. If I'm not looking, I'm not going to see them. If other aspects of my life I can identify are good things in my life, and so that I do those actions that were associated with that good thing more often, it doesn't mean that every time I'm going to have good things and my life will be filled with wonderful things all the time. It means that I am adopting a strategy in which more good things are going to happen because I'm doing those things that are associated with good things more frequently. And so when there are opportunities for good things to happen, I'm going to be able to be there. The third area is, of course, the area of being pervasive. So if I've identified what I'm doing that makes my life go better, and I do it again and again and again, and it's working, then it would be logical to try it in more aspects of my life. So I've gotten used to seeing good, beautiful sunsets because I looked and because I continually look, and so I see more beautiful sunsets more often. Well, maybe that would mean that then, okay, I'm going to be outside more often because there might be things other than sunsets that are beautiful. And so I'm going to take a walk in nature more frequently, just so that I can have the opportunity to be exposed to more things that might be also beautiful. If I recognize that I get better grades if I work a little harder, and so I do that more often in this course, and in this course, and in this course, and now I'm getting better grades, maybe I can expand that into other areas of my life and work a little harder on things that aren't school related, but that I would like to learn or I would like to get better at. And so I start having a systematic strategy that makes a difference in how my life works. So in that study, when they were looking at optimists and pessimists, it isn't that optimists were somehow luckier than pessimists, and that's why they were getting better outcomes. If they were using these attributional styles, they were actually doing things differently in their life to create the opportunities for more good outcomes. So one of the questions that I'm going to invite you to ask yourself on a regular basis is, what went well today? Maybe at the end of your day, you want to take a few moments and review. What went well today? Now, we don't have to notice the things that go well. We have to notice things that are potentially threatening, and our system is highly tuned to that. So if somebody is threatening us, or we're having the beginnings of an illness, it kind of breaks through our consciousness and displaces things so that we pay attention to things that are potentially threatening. We don't have to pay attention to things that go well, but we can pay attention to them. And there's actually something good about that, because that means that if I am to recognize what went well today, I actually have to pay attention and be present to that thing in order to notice it. So that question itself starts a cascade. If I'm asking what went well today, then I become more tuned to paying attention to things that are going well. And when I'm attuned, I will notice more of those things. In the same way that if you were driving down the street and you said, I'm going to just notice how many red cars there are, you begin to notice cars that are red that you wouldn't notice if you didn't pay attention to red things or red cars. So the first half of that question is, what went well today? The second half of the question is, and why did it go well? So if my answer is, I saw a beautiful sunset today, but I got lucky, then I'm not motivated to see more beautiful sunsets, except when I'm lucky. But if I say, I saw a beautiful sunset, and the why I saw the beautiful sunset is because I looked, then I am tuning myself to doing it again, and again, and again, and then starting to expand it in more parts of my life. It becomes that systematic strategy. What went well today, and why did it go well? Now, this is probably at least one aspect of why having a gratitude practice makes a difference for us. It isn't just that it allows us to take the time to acknowledge and be grateful for things we have. Living in a society where we have abundance, being able to have people who care about us, being able to do things that we enjoy. All of those things that we're grateful for allow us to pause and have some thankfulness in our hearts, and that in itself is a pleasant experience. But it also sets us up to be able to recognize, if we take that next step, there's something about the way that I'm living my life that allows me to let these things that I'm grateful for into my life. And for example, if I'm grateful for people who love me, then I can make sure that I make time for them, make time to acknowledge that I'm appreciative of what they do, make time to do the things that help them to want to be around me, and therefore I strengthen those relationships. And together, those stronger relationships make me more grateful because I can feel more that I am connected, that I am loved, that I'm able to give love back, and now I have changed my attitude in such a way that I have that more a part of my life. Which then could easily lead to the interesting observation that, okay, so if I have these people that care about me and I care about them, are there other people in my life that if I just reached out a little bit, I could establish that kind of caring relationship with them too, so that I would have more people in my life that I care about and care about me. This is a systematic strategy. What went well today, and why did it go well? These are the things that we do that help us to be able to develop the kind of optimism that allows us to recover from that sense of learned helplessness and replace that with a sense of agency in our life in which we make a difference about the way things work. So next week we're going to be talking about resilience and how that also helps us to be able to manage our lives in such a way that we don't fall into that struggle with depression, because even when difficult things are happening, we have the ability to recover and manage our lives in better ways. So thank you for your attention to this. I am grateful for your time. Please take the time to watch this and watch our other psychological health talks. And if you so choose, hit the like button so that we know that what we're doing is beneficial for you. Thank you.